Today we're playing Delta Force once more, and we're going to talk about it from a perspective of being good and being bad, those kind of things. And I would love to hear from you as well when it comes to feedback, since I'm pretty sure that some of you guys have now spent quite a few hours playing this free-to-play Battlefield clone-like shooter, if you will. So, I'm going to start straight away by saying that I've had quite some fun playing the game. I enjoyed it already in the playtest. I noticed a few things that needs to be addressed, and we're getting to a few of those things soon. But overall, the game has been launching well so far, meaning not so many bugs or visible bugs or glitches and stuff that you usually see in a lot of modern games and modern shooters being released nowadays. And that is to start with a big thumb up. Another thing that is nice to see or hear, I would say, is that they decided to not use bots any longer when it comes to these, again, Battlefield-like game modes. And I'm really happy that we are now fighting each other, meaning real players instead. It brings much more dynamic into the game, and it feels much better overall. Another big plus is of course all the content, meaning like the game modes, the weapons you can unlock, the camo grind, and of course, as mentioned, the calibration when it comes to fine-tuning the weapons. There's a lot to do here in the game, and again, I'm kind of impressed that they have made it or pulled it off when it comes to also being a free-to-play title, so definitely worth checking out just because of that. The game also seems to play well on many systems if I'm talking about PC. And since I do have a new build, everything is just working fine, it looks good and it runs well. As said, a pretty smooth launch, and I'm not surprised because usually, and this is my experience, when you are playing like playtests, maybe alpha or beta, if the game is doing like well early on, it usually continues or at least have a good launch to start with. After that, the devs don't have to worry too much about really like groundbreaking things or fixes to start with, and they can play it a bit smoother, if you will. And I think that's a very good kind of start they got here when it comes to the game overall from a technical point of view. I think it's important to say that the overall experience that I've had is a good one, meaning a fun experience. And that is, of course, at the end of the day, always the most important thing. Then we can talk about certain things such as bugs or even things in the game that needs to be addressed and fixed. But overall, I've had fun. However, there are things, and we're getting now into the kind of bad part, if you will, that has to be talked about and addressed, and maybe you have already thought about them. Make sure to fill in the comments if you want to. And I'm gonna start by talking about the fact that there's skill-based matchmaking in the game. My take on skill-based matchmaking is that it usually, after some time when it has been analyzed and it starts to kick in, puts players in different brackets, and it's really hard to move away from that. And it's gonna be the same or similar experience game after game. And that can become quite repetitive and boring. It kind of limits the opportunities when it comes to getting a more mixed experience when it comes to the actual game and the gameplay. It's even more weird to think that they have implemented it in a game that is like a Battlefield-like game with so many players at the same time. I don't really get why. I think if they're gonna have skill-based matchmaking, then use it in ranked. That's fine for me. I don't play much ranked, but even so, if I do, I don't mind. I understand then that it can be a tool to, you know, put people together more or less in the same bracket when it comes to their skill level. It makes more sense. The criteria for matchmaking when it comes to getting good experiences and matches were quite simple in many games before the era of skill-based matchmaking, if you will. It has to do with the fact that ping was king, and I think that is important, and it should be exactly like that. Because the problem here is that you might get forced later down the line, if you're doing really well, to play against other players that do not live on your continent even. And that will affect your performance because the ping will get higher. That has already happened in Delta Force as well. So is skill-based matchmaking a bad thing for the game when it comes to Delta Force, especially over time now when it comes to player count? I would say yes, it can have a bad effect over time. I've seen that happening with other shooters because I think a lot of players, especially casual players, are quite tired to just get into another game that has settings when it comes to putting people in different skill brackets regarding skill-based matchmaking. Another thing that comes to mind that might be, I say might be on the bad side of things, it depends on how you look upon it, is the anti-cheat system, which is kernel based, and I've talked about that before, meaning anti-cheat system that is basically downloaded on your PC, and some people say that it's working in the background even though you close down the game, yada yada. I haven't had bad experiences when it comes to kernel-based anti-cheat systems before, and I don't really think it's going to be the case here either. I can understand people's concern to a certain extent. At the same time, we need something that can take care of the cheaters early on when they are logging into the game, if they have cheats applied already when starting up the game. So maybe the kernel-based anti-cheat system is good for the game in the long run. We'll just have to wait and see. Of course, you can fill in what you think about this as well. Another thing of the bad side of things is the kind of overabundance of smoke and stun abilities in the game. When you have many players coming onto certain places on these maps that I call choke points, it's gonna be a spam fest regarding smoke nades foremost, but also other kind of nades and abilities raining in. For example, on a map such as Satched, I think it's called, that you saw earlier in the gameplay, it isn't that fun, to be honest, when it just becomes a kind of spam fest regarding these utilities or nades and stuff. I don't know what to do when it comes to this. I'm not a game developer, but I'm just thinking that maybe not all the operators should have the possibility to equip, for example, smoke nades. I think that would even things out just a bit. Because again, this is also related to the map design. I think the maps overall are pretty okay, or some of them are good. But again, the map called Satched, I believe, is by far the worst one so far in the game. And I usually don't play it when it comes up in rotation. I kind of get out and search for another game. That's how much I do not appreciate that map. The gunplay in this game is pretty straightforward and fun. There's not so much recoil like by default on most weapons. And you can easily make a build using what we talked about before. Of course, the attachments, but also the calibration ability to actually make a gun that almost works like a laser, and that goes across the board with most weapons. I think that's a bit too much, especially if we're talking about range. So either they kind of need to look into the damage drop when it comes to distances between weapons. I think that might be maybe the best idea. Some people has also been suggesting that they should look into a bullet spread system, maybe the ones that was used back in the days regarding Battlefield 3 and 4. And maybe that could just make things better regarding this problem. At least it's on my negative side of things when it comes to this game. For me personally, everything I've talked about here are the most kind of major things I've been thinking about that I hopefully can see improve over time with this game. Because again, it is a fun, free-to-play Battlefield-like game. I've said it like 5 times now. Sorry for that referral, but I can't think of any game that reminds me more of a Battlefield game at the moment than this, even though it actually reminds me more of a Battlefield game compared to what Battlefield 2042 ever did. Isn't that interesting? Anyhow, thanks a lot for watching. Looking forward to your feedback as well. Take care, my friends, and thanks for watching. Later.